The wind carried the smell of dust and cruelty that late afternoon in Cedar Ridge, the kind of day when the sun hung low and mean, bleaching the sky pale and sharpening the edges of every shadow. And Wade Callahan, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing the trail dust of 2 straight weeks in the saddle, was riding into town for a sack of flour and a new bridle when he heard the sound, sharp and ugly, echoing from behind the general store. A woman's cry, muffled but raw, followed by the flat, sickening thud of fists meeting flesh. Wade reined in, listening, the old instincts prickling the back of his neck. He'd seen too much of this in his bounty hunting days, men breaking something fragile because they could, and without a word, he swung down from the saddle and moved toward the alley, boots whispering on hard-packed dirt. What he saw there stopped him cold. A woman crumpled against the wall, her dark hair spilling like a curtain over her bruised face, her dress torn at the shoulder, while 3 men surrounded her, 2 holding her arms, the 3rd shouting curses and striking her again, his voice spitting venom about shame and worthless daughters. Wade's jaw tightened, the words sinking in like barbs. Twin girls, they were saying. She'd birthed twin girls instead of a son, and for that her late husband's kin had decided she deserved a public lesson. Wade didn't ask questions, didn't give warnings. His revolver was out in a flash, the metallic click slicing the air, and in that sudden silence, he said in a voice low and dangerous, "Let her go, or I'll start sending you to meet your maker." One by one, the 2 holding her froze, but the ringleader turned with a sneer, sizing Wade up like a man who'd won more fights than he'd lost, and said it was family business. Wade stepped forward, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes, and replied, "Not anymore," before driving his fist into the man's jaw, sending him sprawling into the dust. The other 2 backed away quick when they saw the cold steadiness in Wade's eyes, and without another word, he holstered his gun, bent down, and offered the woman his hand. Up close, he could see the swell of bruises along her cheek, the split in her lip, and the tremble in her fingers as she hesitated. No stranger had ever come between her and her husband's kin before, but something in his gaze told her he wasn't here for thanks or payment. When she took his hand, he lifted her gently to her feet, keeping a steady arm around her as she swayed. "You're coming with me," he said simply, and though she opened her mouth to protest, her voice faltered when she saw the set of his jaw. In the street, folks had stopped to watch, whispering, because everyone knew who she was, Margaret Hale, widow of Thomas Hale, whose family owned one of the biggest cattle spreads in the county, and whose in-laws had always treated her like a hired girl rather than a wife. Wade didn't care about their gossip. He walked her to his horse, swung her up into the saddle, and led them out of town, past the stairs, past the judgment, toward his own place 5 miles north. She didn't speak until they were clear of the buildings, her voice a rasp as she said he shouldn't have interfered, that they'd come for her, that men like the Hales didn't forgive or forget. Wade just looked over his shoulder and said, "Good. I'm tired of forgetting men like them." At his ranch, a sprawling, weathered spread backed by pine hills, he settled her in the kitchen, fetched water for her face, and started coffee, moving with a quiet assurance that made her feel safer than she wanted to admit. Over the next days, Margaret's daughters came to stay too, little red-haired firecrackers barely 3 years old, who warmed to Wade faster than their mother did. She worked in the garden and cooked in his kitchen, all while carrying the weight of fear that the Hales would come. Because they would. Wade spent that week oiling his rifles and keeping his horses saddled, the tension in him like a coiled spring, and when the Hales finally did ride up, 6 of them, armed and arrogant, Wade was already on the porch, rifle in hand. They demanded Margaret back, said she was property of the Hale name, that her daughters would be raised, properly, and Wade laughed. Low, cold, dangerous, before saying, "You think land makes you men, but it don't. What you do here will decide that, and I aim to bury any man who tries to take what's mine to protect." The shootout that followed was short, brutal, and final. 3 of them rode off bleeding, 2 didn't ride off at all, and the last, the ringleader from the alley, was left alive only to ride back and spread word that Cedar Ridge was done with Hale cruelty. In the days that followed, folks talked, as folks do, some saying Wade had done wrong, others saying he'd done what needed doing. Margaret didn't talk much at all, but one evening, as the sun burned gold across the hills and her girls played in the yard, she stood beside Wade on the porch and said quietly, "You were right. I was coming with you, whether I knew it or not." He didn't smile, didn't make promises, but his hand brushed hers and stayed there, steady as bedrock, and for the first time since her husband died, she felt like her girls had a future. And if you believe, friend, that the West still belongs to those who stand up when no one else will, then hit that subscribe button now. Because there are more tales like this, and every one of them will remind you why grit, loyalty, and justice still matter.